trying to situate here. Okay. Howdy y'all, Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today what I want to talk about is the different ways that I have gardened in the past and why I am slowly transitioning to these beautiful raised beds that are behind me. So whenever I was growing up, I would help my grandparents and my parents in the garden, and we had a pretty big in-ground garden. I mean, like, it was big enough that we were harvesting tomatoes by the wheelbarrow full and then like pushing them through a field to my grandmother's house to turn into salsa and like stewed tomatoes. And we also had squash and okra and peppers. So it was a pretty big garden. It was in the ground, like I said, and it was a ton of prep work to get it ready. At that time, like, no-till wasn't really a thing. I mean, we're talking a few decades ago when I was a kid. So no-till wasn't really like a well-known concept that was in wide use. We definitely were not organic gardeners by any means. So my papa or my dad would get out with the tiller and they would till the garden, and then we would apply like horse manure. I remember going with my papa to a farm, and basically they would fill up the back of the truck with like old horse poo that they had cleaned out of their stalls or whatever, and then papa would bring it back home and we'd shovel it out into the garden, till it in, and then the soil here in North Texas, it's such heavy clay that it took a lot of work to be able to create that space that grew like a really beautiful, bountiful garden space. And because it was in the ground, there was a lot of bending and stooping to harvest and get rid of the dead plants and clean up the garden and plant the garden, and all of those things required a lot of up and down, bending and standing and all of those things. And you know, when I was a kid, it wasn't that big a deal, but now that I'm not a kid and I am quickly getting older, much faster than I would like to admit, I don't want to spend all my time bending and stooping and causing, you know, back pain, more damage to my back. I do have 2 in-ground beds here, one in the front and one in the back. Both of them are primarily flowers. I don't grow food in either location. This back one, the dog will sometimes use the bathroom in, so I don't want to eat where he pees, you know what I mean? So now, you know, there were benefits to that in-ground bed. I don't want to like just sit here and bash in-ground beds. I know there's benefits to them. Watering is a lot easier because it's a whole lot easier to set up irrigation if you're not having to account for, you know, things off of the ground, right? My dad would just set the sprinkler out there, and it was I don't know what it's called. It's not oscillating because it doesn't spin, but it would go back and forth like this. And it was always fun for me and my sister to run through. That's how my dad would water the garden, and it would get the whole space with him only needing to move the sprinkler one time, I think. I would probably guess that the garden was 50 foot long and 25 feet wide. I mean, it was when I was 12, it seemed like a much bigger space than I'm probably describing, but it was a big garden. Watering is easier because you don't have to set up systems above the ground or hand water a lot. And of course I have all of those fond memories of harvesting wheelbarrow full of tomatoes with my grandma and my mom, planting all the plants with both of my grandparents and both of my parents, getting the garden ready with my papa and my dad. All of those things I do have really fond memories of. So I'm not just like sitting here saying I hate in-ground gardening. Like I said, I have flower beds that are in the ground. So this is not a don't plant your garden in the ground video. This is a video of why I choose to garden in these Vigo garden raised beds. That's just a little bit of backstory about my in-ground gardening experience. in North Texas with heavy clay soil that requires a lot of amendments in order to get it something that is usable for growing a lot of food. Now, the first garden that I stuck with happened in 2020. Like a lot of people, COVID happened and the grocery stores were lacking in options, and I got mad that I couldn't find what I wanted, so I decided to just grow it. So I don't know if anybody else's gardening experience was similar to that, or if I know a lot of people were just like at home and bored, so they started a garden. For me, it was because I got mad because I couldn't find it at the store. That first garden that I stuck with started in containers. I will dig through my photos to try to find a picture of that very first small container gardening. That first garden was in containers. The benefits to that was that it allowed me to start small and add on as I felt capable. If I remember correctly, it was just, maybe 10 plants in total. That's including some flowers and maybe some basil. Whenever I find the picture, I'm sure I'll be like, oh yeah, that's all it was. It wasn't very much at all. I could also place the plants in the most optimal location easily. So that very first year I was either chasing the sun or I was running away from the sun with those little containers in hand. I would just kind of go around the yard trying to find the best place for them to get the sunlight that they needed without, frying essentially. It also allowed us to create a relatively beautiful space with a few containers. Now, because I really felt very passionate about gardening very quickly once I planted those containers, that garden space grew very quickly. Able to expand as I needed to or as I wanted to, and that's the great thing about containers. Unfortunately, it can be really expensive. The really nice containers are quite costly. I haven't found an affordable solution for really nice quality, good looking containers. In 2021, I planted all of my tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets. It worked pretty well, except for I planted them in a location where they didn't get enough sun, and so they didn't grow as well as I wanted them to. And then the buckets, whenever we bought this house and we moved here, I brought all the buckets with me and I used them for peppers in 2022. That was a fantastic pepper year. Peppers do so great in 5-gallon buckets. I will never tell you not to garden in 5-gallon buckets, because I think you should absolutely try it, because I think you should stretch those limits and see what can successfully grow in a 5-gallon bucket. I still have some plants that are in 5-gallon buckets. I have a mum right here, right on the other side of you guys, and then I have a hardy hibiscus and an oak leaf hydrangea. I think that's the only 3 things left in buckets. Once I am in a place where I can move them to better containers, then I will. Or I have dedicated raised bed space. I don't currently. All of this is going to be used for vegetable and herbs and annual flowers, so I don't want to dedicate that to things that are going to eventually take up a ton of space within a raised bed. The reason why I'm not still growing peppers in 5-gallon buckets is because after 2 seasons in the Texas summer sun and heat, the plastic got really brittle and it started to break. Anytime I would attempt to move the bucket, a piece of plastic would just break off. So even though it's really inexpensive to replace a bucket, when you're replacing 40, it can get a little costly. The next option, sorry, there's bees right here. The next option that I graduated to was fabric grow bags, and I do still have several around the garden. I haven't graduated completely out of them yet. Behind me, this is the tomato patch. I had 2 seasons in fabric grow bags, 7-gallon and 10-gallon. I had 3 rows of them in this section right here. I still love them. I find many benefits to them. The fabric grow bags are great because most of them will have handles, so you can move them easily, get them situated in a place where you want them. You can create beautiful rows with them, or kind of square, you know, whatever you want to do. The handles make them easy to move. The thick felt holds up really well, at least to Texas weather conditions. So we're talking the extreme summer, the extreme wind. There was a tornado, we think, that came through here in June of last year, and it didn't destroy any of them. The only thing that they cannot hold up to is Christi with a weed eater. I don't know. I'm not very careful. I just try to go in and knock stuff down. Any plant that is growing that I don't need to grow will fall victim to the weed eater eventually. Unfortunately, if the grow bags are in the way, then they are also a victim. The biggest benefit to the grow bags is because they are that felt, it is fabric, so air can get through. As the plants grow, once those roots kind of feel that air, it will send a signal back to the plant for that root itself to stop growing and send down another central root. So what you're left with is not a root bound plant, because a root bound plant will go around and around and around within the container. What you're left with is a very strong central root system. So that's why the tomatoes did so fantastically in them, because they just kept shooting down more roots from the middle of the plant. In 2022, I had a cherry tomato from seeds that I got from my pawpaw that ended up probably 12 feet tall, and it was in a 7-gallon grow bag, just because it had such a healthy root system going. Now, of course, soil health is a big helper with that, but fabric grow bags and tomatoes are really good friends. So if that's your option, you're gonna do fine. The downside to containers, and why I don't have as many, is because they do require more frequent watering, because they should have drainage holes. The water will run out, which means nutrients will also run out. You will have to water more. Aside from the drainage hole, it's a smaller vessel. The water will evaporate off much faster in the heat of the summer. So more frequent watering. The nutrients go out of the drainage hole whenever you water, so you will have to fertilize more frequently. That is really the only downside to containers, unless you're choosing a container size that doesn't work well with the plant that you're growing, which my first year gardening I did a lot of, because my mind couldn't picture a 2-foot plant, like what that really meant in terms of the root space needed. So unless you are planting in containers that are too small for that plant, the only downside is more frequent watering and more frequent fertilizing. In 2020, whenever I was quickly expanding that very first garden that got me hooked on gardening, Jake and I built a cedar raised bed out of 2x6s. It was very expensive to build, but it's still there. It's still at my in-laws. They're still gardening in it, so it holds up fine. The 2x6s hold up great. That was the kind of the turning point for me in my gardening journey. Like, oh, with raised beds, I can plant a whole lot in like a bit of a smaller space with the soil that I choose, or that I am able to put in there. And it was also tall enough to keep the bunnies out, so that was great. There's a lot of bunnies there, and in one of the other raised beds that we built, she would actually like create a nest underneath some of the plants to have her baby bunnies, which was cute, but killed the plant. It also, because it was high off the ground, it saved my back from the constant bending and stooping and all of those things that you do with the in-ground garden. So when I was in my 20s, my earlier 20s, I worked, and even my teen years. So yeah, in my teenage years and my early 20s, I worked very physically demanding jobs where I was either standing on my feet all day, constantly, or I was lifting very heavy things, pushing heavy things, pulling heavy things, moving heavy things, all the heavy things. Or the last few years of my 20s, I was working in kitchens, in various culinary positions on my feet all day. So I have a lot of back issues from mistreating my body in my younger years. Don't do that. Don't mistreat your body. Treat it with respect, so that you don't have a lot of chronic pain whenever you are older. So the raised beds really saved me from sort of enunciating that pain, exacerbating it, bringing it out. And then in 2021, we built 4 more raised beds out of the cedar fence planks. They're inexpensive, and you can build a lot of beds really quickly. They don't take up a whole lot of space. They end up being about 4 foot long by 2 foot wide. So you have like 8 square feet of growing space per raised bed. And then we were able to add on a cattle panel between them for a little bit of vertical space. I'll try to find a picture of that and put it here. So that worked out really great as well. We were able to create like very aesthetically pleasing garden space that was very neat and structured, but still kind of inhabited the wild and unruly stuff that I like to have in a garden. Jake likes very neat, and I'm like, woo, with what I like. Now, we didn't like stain or finish any of the cedar that we used for any of the 5 raised beds, not the 2x6s and not the fence planks. So the humidity really starts to take its toll, especially on those fence planks where they just start warping and rotting very quickly. My father-in-law has rebuilt at least one of them, just trying to get an additional life out of them before just replacing them completely. When we bought this house, obviously we didn't bring those with us. They're still gardening in them. I'm going to be giving them plants that I started so that they can continue gardening in them. So when we moved here, I moved back to the bucket brigade. Those peppers that I talked about were in the buckets. I had the fabric grow bags for the tomato patch, etc. In that time that I was using those various containers, Jake and I had many discussions about raised beds. Ultimately, he left the decision up to me, because I'm the gardener, I'm the one using them, I'm the one growing food out of them. But I wanted to make sure that whatever I chose, he was going to be okay with the looks of. I wanted to make sure that whatever I chose was going to last a while, so that once we put it in place, we weren't going to be rebuilding it over and over and over again. And that also taking into consideration that this is not our forever house. We love this house. I adore this house. This house is so cute and it feels like home to us, but ultimately we want to buy some land and live on a few acres. We're kind of undecided on how much land, but we want to live on some land, have a little bit more privacy. We don't want neighbors, you know, on all sides of us all the time. So I wanted an option that we would be able to take with us whenever we did take that plunge into our forever land, forever home space. So I did a lot of research. He did a lot of research. He actually made the ultimate final decision. He consulted me on it. Like, he didn't just go out and make a decision for me. He actually helped get the ball rolling, and he bought the first 2 Vigo Garden raised beds for me for Christmas in 2022. So by 2 days after Christmas, I assembled them. I was ready. Let's do this. So I was able to grow some turnips, and mostly turnips. I think turnips and peas was what I got out of there in January and February before I started transitioning into spring gardening and such. Reasons, there's a lot of reasons why I liked raised beds. So the reasons I liked raised beds is because I can sit and I can work. Right now I'm sitting on a 5-gallon bucket. That is my tool bucket that I carry with me for my gardening tasks. I can sit on it and work without bending too much and stooping and causing a lot of strain on my back. I can create a space that I've already referred to as organized chaos. I can have the streamlined beds that you see here. Like here I have rows, and then I have one long row over there, overflowing with all of the plants that I can stuff in it, and create just such a beautiful flowing space. I'm talking like trailing nasturtiums with tall okra and beautiful marigolds blooming, and peppers and basil running out of my ears. It's already starting. I can't wait. The raised beds also, because of raised beds, there's less weed pressure, because the weeds can't like grow into the sides of these metal raised beds, right? The way that they get there is by wind blowing like the dandelion seeds. It's not going to be as bad as like what I have in the ground right now, where it's just a solid layer of dandelions on the other side of my greenhouse. I do have a few dandelions that have sprouted in those raised beds, but we're talking like 2 compared to the 200 that are on the side of the greenhouse over there. There's also a lower incidence of rodents. So I have a video about this, how last year I battled rats very badly with my tomatoes. It almost ruined the tomato season completely. Those were in fabric grow bags. They're only like a foot off the ground, and they just hopped right in there, ate what they wanted, and destroyed my hopes for being able to preserve and store a lot of tomatoes. Because these are a little bit taller, it's not going to stop them completely, but it will slow them down. I have done a lot of work in the yard this year to get rid of things that they can create nests under. We had a tool shed in that corner. It's not there anymore. I'm working on doing some things on the greenhouse to get that where it's less likely that they want to live in there. They're not living in there right now, but you know, we don't want to invite them into there. So the raised beds kind of slow them down a little bit, so you don't have the pest pressure from at least rodents. Now, you can get raised beds, or you can build raised beds in any height that you wish, from the lowest to the ground for the tiniest gardener to as high as you need for the mobility impaired gardener. Vigo Garden itself has 11-inch. These are 17-inch, and then they also have a 32-inch that is quite tall, probably almost hip height for me. So no matter what your ability is as a gardener, you can build a raised bed to match that ability. Additionally, my raised beds are far enough apart to be able to wheel my gorilla cart through. I have a larger size, I think it's 7 cubic foot, with like really big robust wheels. I set these far enough apart to be able to get that cart through, so I don't have to like physically haul soil by hand. I can just wheel it where I need it and dump it off, and you know, save my back a little bit more because I'm old. Anyway, yes, I can move that soil without hopefully hurting myself. You never know, I'm clumsy, I'll still find a way. But anyway, regardless of how you choose to garden, this video was not to bash any method. I do apologize if it came off as me bashing all other methods. This method does not reign supreme. This is the method that I chose for the reasons that I detailed in this video. Regardless of how you decide to garden, just go out and plant the seeds. Each method has benefits, not the least of which is healthy, delicious food or beautiful, colorful flowers. So thank you guys so much for watching today. If you found this video informative at all, please feel free to like and subscribe and do all of the YouTubey things. I am inching my way closer to 1,000 subscribers, so thank you so much to all of you who have followed me along this journey so far. If you want to see more content, I also do have a Facebook and an Instagram. Both are under Little Salty Homesteader. But thank you guys again so much for watching, and until next time, go find a way to get those garden manicures. Bye!